Okaeri! Welcome back to my channel, Made Between the Pages. My name is Taylor, and today we're going to be doing my November wrap-up. So I didn't actually have a November TBR. I did fully plan to film that video, but I came down with a case of horrible tonsillitis that just rendered me incapable of just like life and function. So I wasn't able to speak for a while there. So I never actually filmed the TBR. So this is going to be kind of a recent reads, or I did read these in November, but it's going to be kind of more of a surprise to you guys because I didn't actually film a TBR for it. And this is the first time I've really had the time to sit down and like film in a while because I've been super busy recently. So if you see the next couple videos, me with the same hair, same makeup, maybe a different shirt, no you didn't. I've got my neat pour of Woodford Reserve. I've got my candle in the background, so let's just settle in and talk about what I read in November. Now, since I never actually sat down and made my November TBR, this was more of a mood reading month for me, which I have been doing the past couple months and actually really been enjoying. And it worked so well for me this month. Okay, so my lights on my bookshelf have decided to break tonight, so we love this timing when I finally have time to film. Fresh new batteries still not trying to stay on, so that part of the aesthetic is unfortunately going to be missing at the moment, so sorry about that, but I just... Anyway, so this mood reading worked so well for me in November. I have 4 5 stars, and not even just 5 stars, 4 new favorites from all different genres that I picked up this month, plus some other 3 stars, I think 3.5 stars as well. So the first 2 books that I read were actually at the tail end of October, but I'm counting them in the November because they weren't in my recent reads video that I filmed at the end of October. So the first one of those is going to be My Heart is a Chainsaw by Stephen Graham Jones. This was the book pick for the Only Good Book Club, and we were all very excited to read it because what originally brought us together was The Only Good Indians by the same author. Unfortunately, for most of us, myself included, this book was just, it wasn't a hit. I gave this a solid 3 stars because it wasn't a bad book, but it just, the flow of this book did not work for me. So essentially we're following a main character named, oh my god, I just forgot her name. It's not new on my channel, but like this is pretty bad that I can't remember her name right now. I'll put it on the screen. But our main character has suffered through some terrible traumatic things in her life, and in order to cope with those things, she has thrown herself into the world of slashers, like to an insane degree. So the book is told from her perspective, and so it makes sense that we become immersed in the world of thrillers ourselves as a reader. But the amount of page time spent on the details and the minutia of thrillers inside our main character's head just seem to stretch on so long for me. It makes sense in the story as the plot line is that our main character has become convinced that there is a slasher coming to her hometown, and she thinks that she has, you know, isolated all of the individual plot points and characters and what their role will be when the slasher rolls into town. And so we follow her through this, not necessarily knowing what's real, what's not real, things like that. And this book does deliver on, you know, slasher-ness, but it just, I don't know, the process of getting there, I guess the slow burn horror aspects of this book just didn't hit quite right for me, and the type of horror that I enjoy. So while this was not a bad book, I don't think, the pacing and the point of view that we read from, I couldn't get on board with it, and some other people in the book club also felt that way. I'm not ruling out Stephen Graham Jones as an author, as I do think his stories follow like interesting perspectives that I've never read before, and I want to keep, you know, interest in that. But this particular book of his just didn't really hit right for me, so I gave it a solid 3 stars. The last book I read at the end of October was Catfishing on Catnet. Now, this was a book that I heard mentioned on someone's channel. I cannot for the life of me recall who, but I'd only seen it mentioned once on one person's channel, and they were like raving about how much they loved it. And that piqued my interest at the time that I was watching the video. And then I was browsing my local library here in Japan, which has a very small English section, naturally. And I saw that book on the shelves, and I was so shocked because I hadn't heard many people talk about it that it found its way all the way here. So I saw that as a sign to pick it up. This book follows a high school girl named Steph who is constantly moved around by her mother in order to avoid or run away from her violent ex-husband. And as such, Steph hasn't had a chance to really make any permanent friends, because anytime that she settles somewhere or enters a new school, she knows she's going to be leaving it. So this leaves her very dependent on her online friends. And her online friends are centered around this community called Catnet. Basically, it's like a forum where you post pictures of animals, and then if you contribute to the site in that way, you're allowed to stay as part of the forum, and you get separated into small little groups based on shared common interests, and you can make friends that way. So she has really, really close friends on this forum called Catnet. And one of the accounts is actually an AI. So this book combines thriller aspects with the moral dilemma of AI, what the future could look like there, what should it look like there, and it was something that seemed really intriguing to me as a premise. However, I found the ending kind of simultaneously lackluster and batshit crazy. Like some thriller books, when the end kind of implodes, you can see how different plot threads are brought together and it kind of makes sense. For this, it just seemed a bit outlandish, and it didn't really... I don't know what I was hoping the ending to be, but it wasn't what I got. So for me, that's a huge part of a thriller, right? What the ending is like. So that was pretty not satisfactory for me. So that took quite a few points off. But I did love the fan family aspect of this book. It was very adorable. The thoughts on AI morality, while there were some instances where I think more could have been done with that idea, it did delve deeply into it at certain points, so I did like that aspect as well. So overall, I ended up giving this 3 stars. Now this next one is one of those favorites I talked about, and that is A Master of Djinn by P. Djeli Clark. Now in October, I read A Dead Djinn in Cairo, The Angel of Khan el-Khalili, I believe is the name. And also, I have it here, The Haunting of Tramcar 015. So this is the only novella that's out in like a physical form, but it's so cute and small, and I love this so much. I will be collecting the other 2 if they ever have a print edition of it. So I have these 2 books from the Dead Djinn world right now in my possession because I had to get physical copies. I listened to both via audiobook, and the narrator was amazing, but I just had to have physical copies that I could tab and reread. So I talked about this in my previous wrap-up, so this was also 5 stars. But this is the first full-length work that's in the Dead Djinn world, and this book is fantastic. One of my favorite things that has pulled me in through all of the stories I've read in this world is the atmospheric world building that P. Djeli Clark has. And that just shines beautifully in this full-length novel as well. I think if an author gets used to creating like an atmospheric feel in a short novella form, it can be difficult to translate that to a larger, like, adult fantasy, epic fantasy format, but there was absolutely no issue with that transference. I fell right into this world from page 1. This book follows a lot of the same characters that are introduced in the earlier novellas. So our main character Fatma is back along with Siti, and God, they're just so well written. They're fantastic to read about. And essentially Fatma is a detective in this world, and Siti is a spy? It's kind of hard to pin down exactly what she does. But those are arguably our two main characters. There are plenty of other characters in this book, though. So essentially, this is a steampunk Cairo setting where 50 years ago, a scientist named Al-Jahiz ripped open the wall between the worlds, the veil between the worlds of the human world and the magical world, and allowed Djinn and angels and all these other mythical creatures to pass into our world. And ever since then, the world has been scrambling, I guess, trying to figure out how to deal with this new reality. And so Fatma works as a detective for the magical creatures section of the government that interacts with them and works on solving crime involved with mythical creatures. So it's just, oh my god, it's so good. And we start this book off with someone committing the crime of murder, and then claiming loudly and publicly that they are Al-Jahiz returned. And so it is Fatma's job to get to the bottom of this and figure out what's actually going on. I can't sing the praises of this book and all the other books, all the other novellas in this world enough. I'm going to be auto-buying anything in this world because I'm obsessed with it. It's so unique. I love the descriptions of the Djinn. I love the new mythology that I'm being introduced to because I'm a mythology nut and I don't know so much about the different creatures that are introduced here. And I'm enjoying the learning process along the way so much. It was a wonderful book. I enjoyed every second of listening to it, and I definitely will be rereading this in the future. This next book is another all-time favorite, which will be a surprise to no one, and that is Jade Legacy by Fonda, the third book in the Greenbone saga. I have 2 spoiler-free vlogs of me reading this book, just my reactions without any spoilers at all. I'll be sure to link them up above and down below, so please go check those out. I may be doing a dedicated review for Jade Legacy coming soon, possibly. I'll see if I can figure out time to get that done. This book was a perfect ending to the Greenbone saga. Miss Fonda absolutely stuck that landing. The political machinations and details in this book are just off the charts, and if you combine that with the character work that she is so well known for being built up over these 3 novels, all of those aspects coming together just makes for a chef's kiss, fantastic book. I cried real ugly tears over situations and characters that I thought I had written off as being able to produce those emotions from me. And somehow Fonda still got those emotions out of me for those particular characters or those particular situations. Some things that I expected to happen did happen in this book, but not in the way that I expected. And that was just a pleasant surprise for me. The finale of a series doesn't necessarily need to subvert your expectations or surprise you in that way to be successful. Like Game of Thrones Season 8, I am looking directly at you. It just has to satisfactorily deal with the loose threads that the reader is expecting an answer to. And Fonda just did such an amazing job of all of that. And it's not like tied up with a neat bow or ribbon either. Like the ending of this book is so beautifully done and yet devastating at the same time. And that balance was perfectly struck. I've been obsessed with the Greenbone saga since I read Jade City about 2 years ago. I did make a video when I first read Jade City as to why you should read it. It's kind of like a mini review as well, so it's linked up above and down below. If you have not started this series, what is wrong with you? Please, please do it. If you need a kick in the butt, watch that video. I can't really say anything more than that here because it's the 3rd book in a trilogy, and I just don't want to have any spoilers here whatsoever. But it is one of my favorite fantasy series of all time. I will proudly be displaying this on my shelf and rereading it for years and years to come. The next book I read was an audiobook that I picked up on a whim when I saw it on Scribd, and that was Chasing the Boogeyman. What pulled me into this specific thriller is that it's set in the area that I'm from, the DMV area in the States, and it just really drew me in because I don't know why, but things never really seem to be set where I'm from, and when I saw that, it just kind of struck me as something. Well, maybe things are set where I'm from, but I just read fantasy, so like, of course, it's not going to be set where I'm from. So maybe it's a more popular place, you know, as a setting for contemporary, you know, works than I'm aware of. But it was a surprise to me to see that, you know, put in the description. So I decided to pick this one up. This is kind of like a Inception book where it's a book within a book. So the main character is writing a book in the book. And this book is being written when our main character kind of takes a respite between like major jobs in his life and is trying to work on his writing craft because his real dream is that he wants to be a writer. And when he returns home, murders start happening in his neighborhood, which up until this point has been kind of a picturesque suburban community. So, but it's not like the suburban community that's in like the, what's it called, like the rich wife thrillers. You guys know what I'm talking about. There's a whole genre of those. It's not that type of suburban perfection. It's more like middle class suburban, and there's a lot of nostalgia that this narrator has associated with his, you know, his childhood memories in this town, and that's contrasted with the violence that is suddenly visited upon it. So I was very interested in this one. Unfortunately, it was just, again, lackluster for me. It wasn't a bad book, so I can't in good faith, you know, give it like a 1 or a 2 star, but it didn't grip me like I really hoped it would, and I found myself more enjoying like the cutesy, like, what's the word I'm looking for? Natsukashi. Oh my god, I forgot English. Nostalgic. Does anyone else speak 2 languages and then can't remember words in either of them? Because that's a struggle. The nostalgic parts of this book were almost more enjoyable to me. Like, I was like, oh, this is heartwarming, this is nice. And then the murder would happen and I wasn't like so engaged with that part of it, and I felt like I wanted to be, like I should have been, you know? So yeah, this book was kind of, it wasn't anything that I expected, and it just kind of didn't match me, I guess. So I ended up giving it a 3 stars, a solid 3 stars, because like I said, it wasn't a bad book, and this book has a lot of really good reviews, and I can see why. It just didn't work for me. The next book I read was a recommendation from my friend Sarah, because I had said that I was trying to find horror books that work for me, because I want to, you know, make the leap from thriller to horror, because I think I've read quite a few thrillers by now at this point in my life, and I'm interested in horror, but I haven't found a style that works for me. Like, no books have been like 5 stars for me in the horror genre. And so she recommended the book Tender is the Flesh. Now this book is fucked up. But it's fucked up with a purpose. You know those books that like try to shock you? I don't think this book was doing that. It was very purposeful in its messed upness. But basically this is a world in which cannibalism has been, you know, approved of, societally accepted, because animals got this virus that made them all very dangerous. You couldn't eat them, you couldn't keep them as pets. So animals were pretty much exterminated. But people still had this demand for meat. So the slow process began of what's acceptable, what's morally acceptable. And now we're in this world where there are humans that are bred specifically to be eaten, and humans that are considered humans. And I think that the commentary in this book was really, really good. The way, the parallels that the author draws between like the actual meat industry and how applying that to humans makes it a more stark reality of how harsh it is, because it's just the same conditions put onto humans rather than animals. But this isn't also, it's not preachy. It's not like trying to turn you vegan either. I think the balance there was really well struck. One of my favorite aspects of this book was how the author played with and explored what other like sectors, what other business ventures would spring from this societal change, what would be considered acceptable, what would thrive, what would be the new black market. I really, really liked that aspect of it too. So actually when I'm talking about it, I originally gave this a 3.5 stars because I I couldn't help, like, the logical part of my brain was poking holes into the world that was created here, like, oh, this definitely couldn't have happened, and stuff like that. And I was just having, like, a hard time suspending my disbelief at certain parts. But now that I'm talking about it and how much I enjoyed the themes, I think I'm going to bump it up to 4 stars. This was a good book, a really good book, and I did really enjoy it. Maybe enjoying is not the right word to use when I'm talking about a book with cannibalism, blatant cannibalism. But there is one animal cruelty and torture scene in this book, and that is a specific trigger for me. Now, the irony is not lost on me of having the one animal abuse scene trigger me more than an entire book about human abuse and murder and you know, consumption. That irony is not lost on me, but it is what it is. So that particular scene, I would warn you, if you have that same trigger as me, just be aware of that. And I just kind of fast forwarded through that because I don't feel the need to engage with that kind of scene. But that was an easy fix, and I think it wasn't, like I said, gratuitous. It fit with the setting of the book. It's just a personal trigger of mine, so I fast forwarded past that part. Overall, I would definitely recommend this book. It is a translated work as well, and the translation was extremely smooth. I couldn't even tell that, you know, it wasn't originally written in English, so would recommend. Never done this before on my channel. Why did I do this? I haven't filmed in so long that I don't know how I usually act behind the camera. If you hear that weird sound, that's my woodwick candle. So they're supposed to crackle, but right now it's deciding to make a whining sound, which is not as soothing as a crackle. So forgive that sound if you can hear it. I don't know if the camera's picking it up, but that's what that is. But this next one I think I'm the most excited for, and that is How Do You Live by Genzaburo Yoshino. I have filmed an individual review for this, and I will be posting it soon, but this is one of my all-time favorite books. Like, it just jumped to the top within the first couple chapters. I love this so much, and I'll be rereading this over and over and over again. It has so many important things to tell us. This is another translated work. The original author is Genzaburo Yoshino, who is a Japanese man, and the original work was published in 1937 as part of like a 16-book series that he wrote for young readers. And this is the last book in the series, and it became so popular that it's now kind of like a classic. And many people in Japan have read this book, and it still sells really well. The original name in Japanese is Kimitachi wa do ikiru ka, and there is a manga based on this as well. And essentially, we follow our main character, Copper, who is a 15-year-old boy living in Tokyo. And one night, he is sitting above Tokyo with his uncle, and he's looking out on Tokyo at night. And he just has this moment where he realizes how many people exist in the world. How many people are living simultaneously and yet separately? And this realization that he has of the enormity of human life just kind of flips a switch in his brain and changes his perspective on things going forward. His uncle is kind of his like philosophical partner in this book, so he has a lot of these deep conversations and shares his revelations with his uncle, and his uncle in return writes him letters for him to read later. So this book follows those letters as well as the everyday life of Copper. And those everyday life moments, there's meaning extrapolated from them in such a beautiful, gorgeous, stunning way. And this style of taking meaning from small things is a very Japanese way of looking at life, and it was so nice to see that perspective written so beautifully, and the translation also of this is fantastic. The guy who did it, oh my god, I have to give him credit. I will put his name on the screen. Bruno Navasky? I will have the name on the screen, and I want to give him his due credit because the translation of this was beautiful. As someone who speaks Japanese, there were different sections here where I could tell like what Japanese he was translating from, and the words that he chose captured the essence of the original Japanese so well. So I think that this translation is absolutely beautiful. And not only is this outside of this book beautiful, the inside, I mean, can we just look at this hardback? Can we just pause? It's so pretty. And it goes around to the back, so it's not just like only on the front like some of them do. And then on the inside, there are these end pages. Both sides are the same, but... So I tabbed the shit out of this book, not surprising. I'm sure all of the, you know, the next couple times that I read it, I will be tabbing it more each time. So this is a new all-time favorite. I can usually read a book of this length really quickly, but I specifically only read a chapter or two a day, and I sat with it and I thought about it and I let it sink in. And I'm really glad that I read it that way, because I don't know, I feel almost changed after reading this book. Like, I sobbed when I was reading this, and I laughed, and I felt such joy and elation and such sadness. This book, it just connected with something really, really deep inside me, and I'm gonna treasure it from here on out. Another little bonus for this story is that this is Miyazaki Hayao, the CEO of Ghibli, the owner of Ghibli. This is his favorite childhood book, and the last Ghibli movie that he's supposedly making, although he said this many times, but the latest last movie that he's going to be working on at Ghibli to be released in 2023 is based on this book. So if you love Ghibli, you want to know what the original book is like, what it's about, please, I'm begging you, pick this up. I haven't heard anyone talk about it. I googled reviews on YouTube. Good God. I searched for reviews on YouTube and I didn't see not a one. So I'm begging you to please pick this up. It is so good. There are so many wonderful insights about humanity. It makes you reflect on yourself, and I just think that everyone would benefit from reading this book. So you can look at my full review up above and down below. I go into more details about the story itself, some elements of it that I really liked, and maybe that'll help you if you're on the fence of whether to pick it up or not to check out that video. So again, I'll link it up above and down below, but this is a new all-time favorite, and I'm so glad I picked this up. And the last book that I read in November is another surprising all-time favorite. I gave it 5 stars, and that is I, Robot by Isaac Asimov. Now, I've been saying for this past year that I want to integrate more sci-fi into my bookshelf. If you look behind me, I haven't done the best job. I've got Children of Time, which I adored, and I think I gave it 5 stars. If I didn't, I should have. I adored this book. The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet is also here. But I haven't really delved into the genre like I was hoping to. So I decided to, when I saw this audiobook on Scribd, I wanted to kind of go back to the basics of sci-fi and see how I felt about that aspect of the genre. And I didn't expect to dislike this book, but I didn't expect to love it the way that I did. I adore this book. I was savoring the audiobook, and it really made me look forward to commutes to and from work. Robot psychologist Dr. Susan Calvin has been around since the beginning of AI development. She's been involved in how the brains of robots work from before they could talk to when we have supercomputers in this book. And so she's being interviewed about her different experiences with robots throughout this time. So this book is a collection of stories that she tells from this evolution throughout this time span of her life. And it is fascinating. The way that Asimov explores different moral things, this is kind of what I wanted from Catfishing on Catnet, which is unfair to ask of that book, I realize now, but I think that I, Robot is what I wanted, an in-depth moral discussion about robots, AI, what this holds for us. Can a human become too attached to a robot? Can this become unhealthy? What happens when a robot is faced with a dilemma where two of their core principles that they're wired with clash with each other? What happens in this situation? Can a robot think for its own? Can a robot hold contempt for humanity, or is that impossible? These thoughts are so deeply explored, but through a fully human lens that brings you in as a reader. It's not dry. It's interesting because this is viewed through the lens of humanity. So it's something that you can connect to and understand, but the contrast between that and the things being discussed is wonderful, so wonderful, the balance there. And I was obsessed with this book. Whenever I would arrive to work, I would like take the long way around because I wanted to listen a little more, you know? So I didn't expect to love this the way I did, but I adore it. And I'm already like online looking at, you know, editions that I want to have on my bookshelf. So I'm now interested in Isaac Asimov's other work. I know that he has, you know, the Foundation trilogy as well, and a couple other books that he's really famous for. So I'm definitely interested in reading the rest of his canon, his works, slowly throughout the years. That concludes my November wrap-up. 4 so-so books and 4 new absolute favorites. So it was kind of 2 different ends of the spectrum with nothing in between. But, you know, I'll take that. I'll take that over, you know, 2 stars and 1 stars any day. It was a wonderful reading month, and I feel like I'm finally out of the burnout and the book slump, or the reading slump that I was in. So my December TBR might be a little ridiculous because I'm feeling confident again, so look forward to that soon. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and click that bell. I would love to have you as part of this community, and I appreciate it. But for now, I'm gonna head out. Johnny!